Welcome to Infidelity Nest. In today's video, we step quietly into a story about love, loss, choices, and the fragile space between truth and betrayal. Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Claire once believed she had already won at life. From the time she was little, her grandmother used to say that true love was like discovering a rare jewel hidden deep beneath a quiet lake. You had to dive into the unknown to find it. Claire believed she had found that jewel early in her life. She was only 13 when Jake, a shy, bright-eyed boy with a smile that seemed to promise safety, shared his snack with her during recess. It was just a small act, a piece of sandwich, a sip of juice. But for Claire, that simple exchange changed something within her. Their bond grew without effort. Like two branches twining together naturally as they reached toward the same light. They walked through the same hallways, laughed through the same classes, and whispered secrets under the same tree on the school grounds. Every memory of growing up seemed to have Jake's presence stitched into it. When Jake proposed years later under that same tree, the one where they used to study for exams, Claire cried with joy. It felt like destiny had come full circle. The story that began in childhood had blossomed into forever. Their wedding was small, intimate, surrounded by people who had seen their journey unfold since the very beginning. For the first few years, their life felt like a fairy tale that never ran out of pages. Friday nights meant cooking together, experimenting with recipes that sometimes failed, but always ended in laughter. Saturdays were for board games and takeout. Sundays, for movies wrapped under blankets, pretending the world outside didn't exist. Their arguments, rare and soft, usually ended in quiet laughter or a hug that erased the distance. They were each other's comfort zone, the calm after every storm. But as time moved forward, small cracks began to appear. Not from anger or betrayal, but from the quiet erosion of routine. Jake's career took off in the tech world, demanding long hours and countless late nights. Claire found stability in marketing, her days filled with campaigns, deadlines, and endless reports. Their apartment became a reflection of both of them. Motivational quotes Jake loved hanging on the walls, and vintage thrift store finds Claire collected. It was beautiful, curated, peaceful, and yet, inside that peaceful space, Claire began to feel something missing. It wasn't sadness exactly. It was a strange kind of emptiness. A quiet disinterest that crept in slowly, like dusk swallowing light. She couldn't pinpoint when it began. Maybe when their weekends started feeling predictable. The same meals, the same routines, the same smiles that no longer reached their eyes. Or maybe when conversations started revolving more around bills than dreams. At night they would lie side by side in bed, bodies close, minds miles apart. Their screens glowed brighter than their connection. One rainy morning, while waiting for the elevator, Claire caught her reflection in the metal doors. The woman staring back had faint circles under her eyes, hair loosely tied, a face that looked both young and tired at once. It was like she had become a stranger living inside her own life. That was the morning Brooke entered her world. Brooke was new at the company, confident, effortlessly radiant, with an energy that demanded attention. She spoke like life was something to be tasted, not endured. She loved spontaneous trips, wild music festivals, deep late-night talks about purpose and existence. In their first few conversations, Claire found herself captivated. Brooke's laughter was contagious, her worldview unconventional. And then one afternoon, over coffee, Brooke casually mentioned her open relationship, as if it were as ordinary as choosing sushi over pizza. Claire froze. That word, open, hung in the air like smoke. At first she dismissed it as something reckless, foreign, maybe even wrong. But over time, curiosity began to bloom where judgment had been. Brooke talked about freedom, honesty, and love without ownership. She made it sound fearless, a choice, not a rebellion. Claire started to wonder. Had she chosen her life freely, or had she simply followed the safest path? Day by day, she found herself comparing. Brooke's energy against her own fatigue. Brooke's freedom against her own restraint. the laughter that filled Brooke's stories against the silence that filled her home. One day, Brooke looked at her with piercing eyes and said, "You seem alive on the outside, but asleep on the inside. When was the last time you did something just for you? Something without worrying if it's right or wrong?" That question didn't leave her mind. It stayed there, echoing in the quiet moments, in the pauses between Jake's words at dinner, in the hush of their bedroom. Claire began to question everything she had once believed unshakable. Was love still love if it felt like a habit? Was loyalty still noble if it came at the cost of self-discovery? She rehearsed the conversation she needed to have with Jake countless times. In her head, in the shower, even silently while folding laundry. But no matter how she phrased it, it always felt like holding a knife against the very fabric of her marriage. Then one Tuesday evening, under the soft blue light of the TV, Claire finally spoke. Jake was on the sofa, laptop in his lap, a faint smile playing on his lips as he worked. She told him she needed to talk. He closed his laptop instantly, as he always did when she needed him. He looked at her, calm, kind, open, and that made it even harder. She began slowly, speaking about their routine, their comfort, the spark that seemed to have dimmed. Jake listened patiently, nodding, thinking she was suggesting a vacation or new activity. Then she asked softly, "Have you ever heard of open relationships?" The silence that followed was heavier than any argument they'd ever had. Jake stared at her, his expression blank at first, then clouded with disbelief. He asked what she meant, his voice steady but tight. Claire explained carefully, about Brooke, about the conversations, about rediscovering themselves, about love and freedom coexisting. Jake didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He just said quietly that the idea hurt more than if she'd actually cheated. That she was giving more value to a theory than to the life they had built. That night, they lay apart in bed, the silence between them turning into an ocean. The days that followed were stiff, mechanical. Breakfasts filled with awkward silence. Dinners where the only sound was the clinking of silverware. Jake buried himself in work, staying late, while Claire tried to pretend that time would heal what words had broken. Brooke encouraged her, saying that change always feels like destruction at first, that sometimes you need to shake the ground to see what still stands. Claire wanted to believe that. Then one afternoon, Claire came home to find Jake sitting alone, flipping through their old photo album. The pictures showed smiles from vacations, lazy mornings, their first apartment, their first Christmas tree. When he looked up, his eyes were filled with sadness, not anger, not hatred, just deep, quiet sorrow. And that expression broke her heart more than any words could have. Still, she told herself that if he gave it a chance, maybe they could rediscover each other through something new. 3 days later, Jake finally spoke. He said he'd go with her, not because he wanted to, but because he loved her enough to try. That night, Claire dressed with trembling hands. She wanted to look beautiful, but not desperate. Confident, but not careless. She wanted Jake to look at her and see the woman he'd once fallen for. He was already waiting in the living room when she emerged. Handsome, composed, but distant. The drive to the party was wordless. Even the GPS voice sounded louder than their silence. The house was elegant, glowing with soft lights and expensive perfume. Strangers laughed in corners, music played gently, and Brooke, radiant as ever, welcomed them with open arms. Claire tried to act natural, introducing Jake, smiling, pretending this wasn't tearing her apart inside. But Jake's expression never softened. He moved through the rooms like a ghost in someone else's dream. As people chatted, complimented, flirted subtly, Claire felt the tension in Jake's shoulders grow heavier. Finally, she pulled him aside. He said quietly, "I feel like this place is invading us. Like our love is being dissected under a microscope." Claire took his hand, trying to reassure him, but deep down she knew. She had dragged him somewhere he didn't belong. Moments later, she turned, and Jake was gone. She found him outside, sitting in the car, his face buried in his hands. No words were needed. The silence screamed everything. They drove home without speaking. No music, no glance exchanged. Just headlights cutting through darkness. When they got home, Jake began packing. He said he needed space, that he loved her, but he couldn't love himself in the version of life she was asking for. He left quietly, the sound of the door closing echoing through her bones. Days turned into weeks. The apartment became a museum of what used to be. His scent still clung to the pillows. His toothbrush still stood beside hers. Every notification on her phone made her heart jump, hoping it was him. It never was. Then one Friday he returned. No calls, no texts, just the ring of the doorbell. His eyes were tired, his beard unshaven, but his voice was steady. He said he'd thought about everything, that he'd tried to imagine a way back. But he couldn't. He said love should never feel like grief, and staying would only turn their love into resentment. Claire wanted to fight it, to beg, but the words stuck in her throat. Tears fell silently as he said goodbye.